At Christmas, my golden sister demanded I cover the restaurant bills and said, "That's the only reason you were invited." Hey, Reddit! So I guess this is my turn to rant. I've been reading stories here for a while and thought, man, that sounds familiar. I'm the older brother who somehow ended up as the family safety net. Alright, I guess I gotta start from the beginning to paint the whole picture. I'm Sam, and I grew up as the oldest kid, but you'd never know it. My parents were from a background where daughters were treated like they were made of gold and sons were like the afterthought. They didn't mean to be cruel, but the favoritism was there every single day, and it shaped how we all turned out. Emily was the queen of the house. She was always praised, always defended, always first in line for anything she wanted. For example, when Emily was in high school, she didn't have to get a job. She got new clothes, new supplies, even a laptop when she started college. I used a second-hand one that barely turned on. She could spend weekends with friends, join clubs, hang out. And I had to mow lawns and stock shelves at a store to pay for stuff like gas and even some school fees. My parents would tell me they were proud, but they wouldn't let me forget that Emily needed to focus on school. It's not like Emily was evil or anything, but she knew she had the power. She learned real quick that crying or asking nicely would get her what she wanted. I remember one time she wanted a class trip to another city. My dad said it was expensive, but Emily pouted, Mom jumped in, and next thing you know, trip paid in full. Meanwhile, I was trying to scrape together money for my college books and ended up taking on extra shifts. It built this quiet resentment in me, but also this habit of just staying quiet and dealing with my own stuff. When Emily hit college, things got worse. She had zero financial sense because she never had to learn it. She wanted to live on campus, parents paid. Luke came into the picture around then. He was older. Emily acted like she was saving him, like they were this perfect couple starting a family. My parents weren't thrilled, but they still opened their wallets. Luke was polite enough, but I could tell he was the type who was okay with people taking care of him. I think the biggest slap in the face was how she'd barely come home, except to ask for things. Meanwhile, I was home visiting, helping with chores, talking to Dad when he got sick, and she'd just breeze in like a celebrity. When Emily got pregnant with Kara, Mom was over the moon. I was happy for her too, but it was like the royal baby was arriving. Everything was about them. Luke moved in eventually, and Dad just kind of shook his head but didn't fight it. They started covering some of their bills, buying baby stuff, all that. Emily wanted this small used car to get around. Dad said okay but couldn't pay for it outright, so he co-signed. Payments were dirt cheap, like $50 twice a month. She swore she'd handle it. Months went by, and one day the bank called the house looking for payment. Dad was confused. I was home that day and answered first. I couldn't believe it. She hadn't paid a single dime. Dad was furious. He called her, and she promised to catch up. Couple months later, another call. Dad had enough and told her to bring the car back. That's when she admitted she sold it for scrap because it needed repairs she couldn't afford. She sold a car she didn't even own fully, leaving Dad to pay the loan. I think that was the first real crack in the family image of Emily. But even then, they just gave her a lecture and paid the thing off. I kept my mouth shut because if I said anything, I'd be the bad guy. Looking back, I realize Emily was never taught consequences. Every mistake got covered. Every bill got paid. Luke probably saw this and thought, jackpot. To be fair, she could be sweet sometimes. And when the kids were born, she was a loving mom. But when it came to money and responsibility, it was like dealing with a teenager in an adult body. I learned to fend for myself and trust no one with my money. And Emily learned that someone would always pick up the slack. It's not a good mix, especially when you're siblings. A couple of years late, Emily's already got Kara and Kate. Luke's around, working some retail job with weird hours. I was working full-time, newly married to Diana, and we were doing okay, but not rolling in money. One night around 9:30, my phone rings. It's Emily, and she sounds panicked. She says, "Sam, we're out of money. We barely paid rent, and now there's nothing for groceries. The girls don't have lunches for school." Now I'm a sucker when it comes to my nieces. Those kids could ask for the moon, and I'd try to find a ladder. So I asked her how much she needed. She says $300. To me, that's a lot. But for a family of 4? She says she'll pay me back when Luke gets his next paycheck in 2 weeks. Okay, fine. I tell her I'll drive over with a check. When I get there, she's super thankful, says this will help them get through. I believed her. Next day, I'm at work and something is nagging me. I decide to call her to remind her to deposit the check. Luke picks up. He's casual, says she's not home. I ask where she went. He says, "Oh, she's out of town for that Chicago trip, remember? The gaming thing." This hit me like a brick. She'd mentioned some gaming convention in Chicago once or twice in passing. But I didn't think she was actually going, especially not when she just said she had no money for groceries. I asked, "What do you mean?" She said she needed money for groceries. Luke hesitated, then said something like, "Yeah, but she promised to pay it back." She really wanted to go. I was furious. I didn't yell because what's the point? I just said okay and hung up. That night, I told Diana and she was speechless. Later that week, I told Mom and Dad what happened because I figured they should know. I expected them to be upset, maybe even talk to Emily. Instead, they both just sighed. Mom said, "Sam, she's under a lot of stress. She has 2 little girls, and Luke's hours are all over the place. You shouldn't make her feel bad." Dad chimed in, "You've always been the strong one, son. She needs more help than you do. Don't be so harsh." I couldn't believe it. They weren't mad at her for lying. They were looking at me like I was being cruel for even bringing it up. It was like I was the bad guy for caring. That was when it really hit me. No matter what Emily did, they'd always find a way to defend her. A few weeks later, Emily calls again with the same line. Money's tight, kids need food. This time I said yes, but told her, "No cash. I'll take you grocery shopping." She hesitated, tried to talk me out of it, but I stuck to it. Next morning, I show up. She's annoyed, but comes along. At the store, I'm expecting a big haul for the kids, but she barely grabs anything. Bread, milk, some snacks. I asked, "That's it? You said you were out of food." She mumbled something about not wanting to overdo it. That's when I knew. It wasn't about groceries. She just wanted cash. After that, I made a rule. No more money, ever. If it was for the kids, I'd buy it myself. But watching her lie so easily, using her own kids as leverage, that stuck with me. It was the first time I really started pulling back. While all this was going on, Diana and I were still figuring out our own life. We weren't rich, not even close. I was working full-time in IT support at a mid-sized company. Long hours, a lot of pressure, and honestly not the best pay. Diana worked as a medical receptionist. She was finishing some night classes, trying to move up in the healthcare world. Between rent, car payments, student loans, and just trying to keep the lights on, we weren't swimming in cash. We had our share of struggles. There were months when I'd skip out on little things I wanted because bills came first. Diana would pick up extra shifts at the clinic to cover something unexpected, like when our old car broke down. We weren't poor, but every dollar mattered. That's why Emily asking for money hit harder than she probably realized. We weren't sitting on piles of cash. We were just better at budgeting and saying no to things we couldn't afford. We didn't go on vacations. Our idea of a night out was maybe pizza and a movie at home. Any savings we had were for emergencies or the hope of buying a small place one day. So when Emily acted like we were the well-off ones, it felt like a slap in the face. We were working our butts off to keep things stable while they were blowing through money and calling us selfish when we said no. But Diana and I were a team. Even when I was frustrated, she'd remind me, "We're doing the right thing for us. Just keep your head down, work hard, and don't let them drag you down." I honestly think that mindset saved us. It kept us focused on what we could control, and not on trying to fix Emily and Luke's chaos. A few weeks later, Diana and I went to visit Emily one weekend. We didn't do this often because it was always a bit awkward, but the girls had been asking for us, and we missed them. Their place was small, kind of messy, but we didn't care. The girls were sweet and happy to see us. We brought a few things: a board game, some snacks, and E brought food in our casserole dish since I knew they were always complaining about bills. At first, everything was fine. We ate, laughed with the kids, watched a movie. But as I was helping clean up in the kitchen, I noticed some things that didn't sit right. One of my old college textbooks was on their shelf. An old blender that belonged to Mom was on the counter. And when I asked about the casserole dish I brought, Emily said, "Oh, we'll keep this. We don't have enough dishes." I told her I needed it back for something, and she rolled her eyes, saying, "Sam, you don't even use half your stuff. We really need it more." It didn't stop there. Luke showed me around their place, and I noticed some of Dad's tools in the closet, the same ones he let me borrow when I moved out. I asked, "How did you guys get these?" Luke said casually, "Emily told your parents we needed them, so they gave them to us." I was stunned. My parents never even asked me. They just handed things over because she said she needed them. I tried to bring it up gently with Emily, but she brushed it off. "Why do you care? You have more than enough. We're just trying to get by." It was the same attitude. Anything they wanted was automatically more important, and if I said no, I was being selfish. Later that week, I talked to Mom and Dad about it. I wasn't even mad, just confused. But instead of understanding, they guilt-tripped me again. "Sam, they have kids. They're starting out. You'll get more things later. Don't make such a fuss over little stuff." It was like I wasn't allowed to be upset. The more I tried to explain that they'd taken my things without asking, the more it turned into me being the bad guy. That visit taught me a lot. It wasn't just money Emily felt entitled to, it was anything. If it wasn't nailed down, she figured it was up for grabs. And our parents? They defended her every time. To them, Emily wasn't doing anything wrong. She was just managing. For me, it was another reminder that I was always expected to give and never complain. Years later on Christmas Day, Emily and I were on decent speaking terms. But things were always a little tense because of money. Diana and I had settled into a routine where we didn't really see Emily and Luke much, unless it was about the kids. So, Christmas Eve, my phone rings. Emily. She's cheerful and says, "Hey Sam, what are you guys doing tomorrow?" Luke's dad, Mark, the girls and I are free. Mom and Dad said they might swing by too. Want to go out for dim sum? I'm thinking sure, why not? Diana's parents were out of town, so we didn't have any plans. Plus, Kara and Kate are fun to be around, and maybe seeing Mom and Dad would be nice. I said yes. Anyone who's been to dim sum on Christmas knows it's a madhouse. You wait forever, it's loud, but it's good food. We get there, wait maybe 20 minutes for a table. We had gifts for Kara and Kate. We get seated, everyone's laughing, kids are excited, food carts come around, and it's pretty good. I'm feeling like maybe this is going to be a nice memory. Then the bill comes. I should have seen it coming, but I didn't. The server comes over and asks if it's separate or together. I'm about to say separate when Emily says, "Actually, can you just put it all together? We'll split later." My radar goes off, but I stay quiet. We're talking maybe 120-something bucks for 9 people, which isn't bad, but still. When we get to the counter, I pull out my card, and Emily suddenly says, "Sam, I have to be honest. I don't have any money. Luke's cards are maxed too." Then, she added, "Sam, don't ruin Christmas for the kids." And then, like clockwork, Dad says, "Sam, just cover it. It's Christmas." Mom chimes in, "They're trying. They just need help." Then, Emily said, "That's the only reason you were invited. Now picture this. It's packed, people everywhere. And my wife Diana is standing off to the side with Kara and Kate. Emily's basically saying if I don't pay, I'm ruining the holiday for Kara and Kate. I swear my face got hot. But I didn't want to make a scene, so I handed over my card and paid the whole thing. Emily then pulls out a crumpled $5 bill and says, "Here, it's all I've got." I told her to keep it. We walked out and I didn't even say goodbye. Diana was quiet, but I could tell she was mad. On the way home, she asked why I always let them get away with this stuff. I didn't have a good answer. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was because I didn't want to make a scene in front of the kids. I told her, never again. And I meant it. That was the last time we ever agreed to go somewhere with them, without knowing exactly who was paying. It was also the moment I realized that Emily and Luke had no problem using guilt to get what they wanted. They weren't just broke. They were strategic about it. To be fair, Kara and Kate were sweet as always. They hugged us and thanked us for the gifts. But the adults? That day, they lost a big chunk of respect from me. I went home thinking about how tired I was of feeling like the backup wallet. I worked hard for my money, and so did Diana. That Christmas lunch was when I really started saying no more often. It was the first time Diana saw me draw a line, and once you learn to say no, it gets easier. If there's one thing Emily and Luke are consistent about, it's turning any event into a chance for drama. For example, I was a broke 17-year-old kid. Emily was pregnant with Kara and had this big baby shower. She and Luke planned it themselves, which I always thought was odd, because usually someone else throws it for you. Anyway, I wanted to do something nice, even though I didn't have much money. I scraped together my last 20 bucks and bought a Tiny Toons onesie and a couple of blankets. I wrapped them up nicely, wrote a card, and thought it would be fine. At the shower, Emily opened gifts while everyone watched. She got to mine, opened it, and her face just dropped. Then she said, "Oh, the theme was Winnie the Pooh. This isn't really what we wanted." Before I could even say anything, Luke's dad Mark grabbed the onesie and said, "This isn't even worth 10 bucks. He tossed the blankets into a pile like they were nothing. People in the room went quiet. I was so embarrassed I could barely breathe. I apologized and said I couldn't afford more. Emily just shrugged. Then, Mom, who had been sitting nearby, came over, and instead of defending me, she sighed and said, "Sam, you should have asked me for money. You know your sister likes things done a certain way." It wasn't gentle. It was like I'd embarrassed them by even showing up with something I could afford. Dad shook his head and said, "Don't make this a big deal. It's her day, not yours. Next time, try to step it up." It was like somehow me being broke and trying to help was the problem. Nobody said a word to Mark for being rude. Nobody told Emily she was out of line. The message was clear. I was the one who should have done more. I left shortly after, humiliated and angry, but not surprised. Fast forward a few years, Kara's about to turn 6. Emily calls me and says, "We want to do something special, like bowling, but money's tight. Can you help?" Despite everything, I wanted Kara to have a good birthday. Diana and I agreed to bring a homemade cake and goodie bags for the kids. We spent maybe $100 altogether, which was a lot for us at the time. The day of the party, we arrive early, set everything up, bring the cake, give the kids their bags. Mom and Dad even came. The party goes great. The kids are bowling, laughing, eating cake. Then the bill comes. The worker asks who's paying. Silence. Emily looks at me. Luke looks at me. Mark looks at me. Mark says, "Well?" I said, "Well, what? We did the cake and bags." Mark says, "Yeah, but you cheaped out on the cake. It's homemade. The least you could do is cover the bowling." Before I could respond, Emily calls Kara over and says, "Kara, Aunt Diana and Uncle Sam don't want to pay for your party." My stomach dropped. Kara looked confused, but then smiled and said, "That's okay. They brought the cake and presents. Thank you." She hugged me and Diana. That shut them up real quick. But then Dad leaned over to me and muttered, "Sam, just pay it. It's not worth upsetting everyone." Mom said softly, "She's trying, Sam. They're not as stable as you two. Can't you just help?" It was like no one cared about what we'd already done. They were more worried about keeping Emily happy. I smiled, hugged Kara, and said happy birthday. Then Diana and I left, without paying the bowling tab. We'd done our part. Moments like that showed me that no matter how much we did, Emily and Luke would always want more. And our parents? They'd always cushion her. It wasn't about the kids. It was about making sure Emily didn't have to take responsibility. Even after those incidents, they'd sometimes drop comments like, "You're lucky, you don't have kids to pay for." As if saving money and working hard was something to be ashamed of. Every time something like that happened, I pulled back more. I still loved Kara and Kate, but Emily and Luke, they made it hard. And watching my parents back them up just made it worse. The crazy part is that after the party, Emily actually called me later that night. At first, I thought she might be saying thanks or something, but no. She jumped right in. "You know, the party ended early because you made things awkward. You embarrassed me in front of everyone." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I said, "Emily, are you kidding me? We brought the cake, the treats, the gifts. We spent money we didn't even have to make sure Kara had a nice birthday. You tried to guilt trip me into paying for the whole thing, and even dragged Kara into it. That's on you." She didn't back down. She raised her voice. "You could have just paid. It wasn't even that much. You make more than us. Why do you always have to act like some kind of victim?" Now I was getting heated. "Victim? You stood there and made your 6-year-old think her uncle was being cheap because I didn't want to cover your bill? That's messed up, Emily. You humiliated me in front of everyone." She shot back, "You embarrassed yourself. You always make things harder than they need to be. If you loved your nieces, you'd help without making a scene." That's when I lost any patience. "Don't you dare throw the kids into this. I love Kara and Kate. That's the only reason I even show up. But you keep using them to squeeze money out of everyone. You don't get to make me the bad guy because I said no." There was a long pause. Then she snapped, "Fine. Next time, don't bother coming." I said, "Gladly," and hung up. My hands were shaking. Diana asked what happened, and I told her everything. She just said, "Good. You finally said what needed to be said." It didn't fix anything. But for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I felt done. Now we jump ahead to when things really started to show how different Emily and I were raised. Dad got sick, stomach cancer. It was quick and brutal. He was told he had maybe 3 months, and that turned out to be pretty much spot on. Those last months were rough. He was in and out of the hospital, and I was there as much as I could be. Emily came by sometimes, but mostly when she wanted something. She never really asked how he was doing, just kind of showed up, chatted for a few minutes, and left. I wasn't shocked. It was how she had always been. Later, Dad passed. We were still at the hospital, and Emily's first words to Mom were about life insurance. Not, "How are you?" Not, "How are we going to plan the service?" Just straight to money. Mom looked tired and sad. She didn't answer her right away. We got through the funeral, and Emily was barely around, except to pick out what she wanted from Dad's things. Mom saw it all, but she didn't say much. She just kept quiet. A couple weeks later, I came home from work and saw Mom sitting with George, Dad's friend who was a life insurance guy. I asked what was going on, and she told me she was applying for a big policy, $500,000. She smiled and said, Just make sure Emily knows when the time is right. I thought it was weird, but I didn't push. I figured maybe she wanted to make sure we were both okay if something happened. What bothered me more was Emily. She didn't visit Mom much after Dad passed. She'd call once in a while, but mostly to talk about money, how the rent was late, how the kids needed things, how Luke's hours were cut. Sometimes she'd throw in a joke about how Sam's got it easy with no kids. Mom would get off those calls quiet and heavy, like they took something out of her. There were a few times Emily called me too, usually with some story about Kara or Kate needing supplies. I mostly said no unless it was specifically for the girls, and even then I'd just buy it myself. I wasn't going to hand over cash again. When I told Mom about it, she'd just sigh. She's struggling, she'd say, but even she sounded tired of the excuses. She seemed sadder, like she wished Emily would step up and be the daughter she believed she could be. It wasn't anger, it was disappointment, and that somehow hurt more. Then, about a month after Dad passed, Mom died suddenly. Heart attack and stroke. It was awful. I was crushed. Emily came to the hospital, hugged me, and then asked if Mom had the insurance. I said, yeah, she applied. We'll see what happens. Her face lit up. I didn't think about it at the time, but she looked almost excited. After the funeral, Emily kept asking about the policy. I told her we had to wait. A few weeks later, a letter came in the mail. I opened it. It said Mom's application hadn't been approved because of health issues. There was no payout. My heart sank, not because of the money, but because I knew what was coming. I called Emily to tell her. The reaction was unreal. She screamed at me. Luke got on the phone and started yelling about how they needed that money for rent, for bills, for their kids' future. Then we had to deal with everything they left behind. Dad was always good with money. He worked hard, saved what he could, and made sure there was something for us when they were gone. When all the dust settled, the estate was split evenly between Emily and me. It wasn't like winning the lottery, but it was a good chunk, enough to buy a modest house or pay off some debt and breathe a little easier. Diana and I decided to be practical. We bought a small house outright, paid off the little debt we had, and invested the rest. Nothing fancy, but safe. Emily and Luke? Different story. At first, they sounded smart. They bought a house, but instead of buying it outright, they put down maybe 10% and financed the rest. They also got a new used car. They seemed proud of themselves. I thought maybe they were turning things around. I really did. But that lasted maybe 6 months. One evening, my phone rings. Emily's crying so hard I can barely understand her. I can hear Luke in the background, raising his voice. We're losing the house. We can't keep up with the mortgage. I was stunned. What happened to the inheritance money? You guys got more than enough to at least get started. She hesitated, then said, it's gone. We had bills, repairs, stuff for the kids. It just went fast. But her tone told me she wasn't saying everything. I knew Luke liked gadgets and gaming stuff, and Emily never met a shopping trip she didn't like. Then she dropped another bomb. The bank even offered us a deal. Pay a couple months and roll the rest into the loan. But Luke said no. He didn't think it was worth it. We decided to sell the house fast and just be done with it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Did you at least make any money from the sale? Barely, she admitted. A couple thousand. And she said it like it wasn't a big deal. A few months later, I got another call. Emily this time, not crying but clearly annoyed. We can't pay rent. Can you help? I said no, flat out. Suddenly, I hear Luke shouting in the background, loud enough to rattle the phone. Tell him he owes us. He stole part of our share. $10,000 from the estate. He took it. I could feel my blood pressure rising. What are you talking about? That money went to Mom and Dad's funeral, the headstones, legal fees, and fixing up the house so it could even sell. You both agreed to it. You signed off on it. Emily snapped back. We didn't know you were going to keep anything for yourself. You always think you're in charge. That was it. I told Diana I was driving over, and I did. When I showed up at their rental, Luke opened the door with his arms crossed. Emily was sitting on the couch, glaring. You've been stealing from us for years, Luke said. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was insane. Stealing? You mean using my own money to pay for our parents' funerals? You mean keeping track of every dime so this mess didn't get worse? You agreed to all of it. I even said you didn't have to, but you did. And now you're calling me a thief? Emily jumped in. You think you're better than us because you save your money. You have no kids, no stress, no real bills. You hoard money while we struggle. I said, you struggle because you refuse to manage your lives. You had the house, the money, every break possible, and you threw it away. That's not on me. Luke got loud, stepping closer. If you really cared about family, you'd help us now. The least you could do is cover a few months' rent. I stood my ground. Number, I'm done. I've paid for birthdays, for showers, for meals, for bills. I paid for our parents' funerals without blinking. And you know what I got? Accused of stealing. I won't give you another penny. Emily's face twisted. Fine. Don't ever come around then. Don't expect to see Kara and Kate anymore. That hurt. But I stayed calm. If that's your choice, so be it. But don't put the kids in the middle of this. They'll figure out one day who was actually there for them. I turned and left. My phone blew up for days after, but I ignored it. At that point, I knew nothing I did would ever be enough. And the more I gave, the worse they treated me. It blew my mind how fast things changed. They didn't want to talk about how they blew through thousands of dollars, but they were happy to point fingers. Anytime they were broke, it was someone else's fault. Jobs, bills, kids, me. It was always something. Never them. Diana and I just kept our distance. We stayed focused on our own lives. But that whole situation opened my eyes. Emily and Luke had been given a safety net most people would kill for, and they shredded it. They blamed everyone else when it was gone, even me. It was frustrating, but also freeing. I realized I didn't owe them anything. The saddest part was the kids. Kara and Kate were seeing this. They weren't little anymore, and they were starting to understand. They were polite when we saw them, always sweet and thankful, which makes me think they could see the difference between us and their parents. That made me feel better, at least. Maybe they'd learned something from us, if not from their own mom and dad. By now, you've seen the pattern. Emily and Luke making bad choices and expecting someone else to fix them. But there are a couple smaller incidents that really sealed it for me and showed me the truth about how far gone things were. One thing that sticks with me, Mom's funeral. I was on autopilot, trying to keep everything together. Emily and Luke showed up, stayed a little while, but spent most of the time talking to each other. At one point, Luke's dad Mark and Emily were walking around our parents' house, pointing at stuff they liked. Diana told me later that she heard Emily say something like, "It'll be all ours soon." She said it in front of people. Cousins even tried to calm me down because I was ready to lose it. Looking back, it makes sense why so many relatives didn't want much to do with them. And then there was the train station. This one was like the cherry on top. I had hurt my leg and was on crutches. Emily had Dad's car at the time, this was before Dad passed, and said she could give me a ride home from the station. I waited, called her, she answered and said, "Sorry, can't. We're going shopping." She literally drove past my house on the way to the mall while I stood there trying to figure out how to get home. That day was rough, but it taught me something. Some people will never change, and you have to stop expecting them to. Before they died, Mom and Dad apologized to me for how they raised us. They admitted they treated Emily like she could do no wrong and didn't give me the same support. That meant a lot. I guess they saw it in the end. Maybe that's why Mom tried the life insurance thing, to teach Emily a lesson one last time. Now, Emily and Luke are still around, still making mistakes. They rent, they complain, they struggle, but never really settled. Luke bounced between jobs, retail, warehouse work, a short stint doing deliveries. Emily kept the same habits, always trying to live bigger than what they could afford. Sometimes they drop little comments about how I'm lucky or how Diana and I have it so good. But I know the truth. We worked for what we have. We learned the hard way. They never did. I keep my distance now. I don't hate them, but I don't trust them either. Life's calmer that way. The kids know we care, and that's enough for me. Maybe one day Emily will understand, but I'm not holding my breath. Now they're still struggling while the brother they accused of being selfish is just fine.